Hello everyone and welcome to the Minimalist Gourmet. Today I'll be teaching you how to make an apple cobbler, the most quintessential dish from the United States. It's quick, easy, and inexpensive to make. Now let's take a look at the ingredients. The filling and topping actually share the vast majority of these commonly found ingredients. We're going to kick things off by juicing one lemon. The juice is actually going to help us when we toss the apples in it to prevent it from browning prematurely as we're working. Definitely don't skip this step if you're planning on making the pie ahead of time but not baking until later on. Moving on to the star of this show, the apple. Here I'm using Granny Smiths, which are quite traditional, but you can use any mix of Granny Smiths, Honeycrisp, Rayburn, Pink Ladies. These are going to add great flavor and texture. You're going to want to avoid things like Red Delicious and Fuji or any type of soft apple that won't hold up well to cooking. It'll just turn to mush. We're not looking to make applesauce. After we've peeled the apples, we're going to move on to cutting them. I prefer slices that are just big enough to fit on a spoon or a fork. You can go bigger if you'd like, but the most important thing here is that you want to pick a single size and stick to it. What you're looking to avoid is having pieces that are larger and smaller mixed in together. This is going to be a problem later on when you bake it, because the bigger pieces won't quite be done enough and the small pieces will be a little overdone. So try to just pick one good size and maintain that throughout all your cutting. And toss those freshly cut apples right into that freshly squeezed lemon juice. This will help it from browning as we're working on the rest of the recipe. I didn't actually bake this pie for a couple hours after assembling it. I like to use a blend of brown and white sugars. I find this gives the greatest balance and depth of flavor without being too overpowering or one-sided. The brown sugar brings a nice rich depth of flavor here, but if you use solely brown sugar, it ends up being a little bit too overpowering and kind of mute the other flavors. Cornstarch will mix with all these lovely juices and create a really nice syrup that will thicken. So if you want it a little thicker, add a little bit more cornstarch. I added cinnamon and nutmeg, both very traditional. Also quite popular are clove, ginger, cardamom, and anise. Go ahead and try them all if you'd like. The obligatory dash of vanilla to balance out all these flavors. And a dash of salt. And no, this will not make it taste salty. This is actually going to make all the flavors pop and make all of them taste a bit more like themselves. Now with everything together, you're going to want to go ahead and mix this really well. You definitely want to make sure all these spices are integrated as well as all of the juices getting mixed with that cornstarch so that later on it can thicken and make a nice thick rich sauce. Like I said before, the filling and the topping share quite a few ingredients. This helps reduce the cost as well as keeping your pantry free of space. Now just as a note here, I actually used rice flour to make my cobbler completely gluten-free. However, you can stick with the traditional wheat flour if you'd like. And again, we're going to go with a blend of brown and white sugars. This time the brown sugar is going to add a punch of flavor, and the white sugar is actually going to make our topping crisp up a little bit firmer and be a little bit more crunchy than it would be if we just used straight brown sugar. You can absolutely adjust these ratios as you like. And we're going to use the same types of spices in the topping as we did the filling. This gives it a nice cohesive flavor that carries throughout the dish. And of course a little dash of salt. Trust me, you do not want to leave this out. It won't be the same. Next up is the oatmeal, and note here I've reserved a quarter cup for later. You'll see why. I had some walnuts left over and I added them to my topping. However, feel free if you have peanuts, pecans, almonds, all would make a great addition and a nice crunch to this topping. We're going to bring everything together with butter because it works really well as a binder and because, well, butter, it's absolutely delicious. Small dash of vanilla because we want to sneak flavor in at every opportunity here. I start by bringing everything together with a fork. This prevents the spices and the vanilla from sticking to my hand and taking them out of the dish. But once it's become integrated slightly, I go ahead and switch to my hand. And you can really work this mixture well. Essentially, you're making an oatmeal cookie, so go ahead and work the batter pretty well here and make sure everything is completely integrated. I ended up with this, which ended up being a little bit too sticky still. You can notice it's sticking to my hands and it doesn't want to break apart very easily. We are going to simply add that quarter cup of reserved oats from earlier that we withheld to drive out some of that moisture. And after we've added it, we have what you see here. The dough is no longer sticking to my hands and it breaks apart into nice little pellets a little easier. So let's go ahead and move on to assembly. Use an oven-safe dish and make a nice even layer of apples. You can make it thinner, you can make it thicker, that's okay, but you want to look for an even layer. My apples were extra juicy, so as you notice there's quite a lot of juice left in my bowl here. I want to definitely add some back into these apples, but not quite all of it. I think all of it would be a little bit too much and end up making a thin sauce, which is not what we're looking for. And finally moving on to the topping. Now when you're adding the topping, it's really important that you don't put on a really heavy thick layer. What you're looking to do are make broken up little pieces that have a lot of airspace around them and are kind of stacked on top of each other. This will create a lot of little nooks and crannies that the air can get into and crisp it up and make it just super duper delicious and crunchy. And your finished product should look a little something like this. As a minimalist that travels full time, sometimes you get equipment like this in your Airbnb, a 70-year-old piece of steel that you have to lay on the ground to light. But I assure you, if I can make a cobbler like this in this oven, which you have at home, will work just fine. And I don't even know what temperature it cooks at because there's just a little dial that says big flame and small flame. And to be honest, it doesn't even work. It really is just binary. It's on or off. But for you, it's going to be 350 to 375 Fahrenheit. Put your cobbler onto a baking dish before you put it in the oven to catch any drips that may or may not happen. Trust me, it's a lot easier to do this than clean up later. After 25 minutes, I pulled it from the oven to check it. It's not quite done. Notice there's no bubbling around the edges, and as we tap it, the cobbler isn't quite crispy on top. Finally, we're going to go ahead and try skewering a few apples. You're looking for your apples to yield, but here you can see there's still a little bit too resistant, so we're going to put it back in for another 15 minutes. After 15 more minutes, you can see the sauce is bubbling up around the edges, which is great. And when we tap the cobbler, it makes a nice rebound sound. It's nice and firm. Finally, we're going to go ahead and skewer some apples. Make sure to check in quite a few locations to make sure it's completely cooked. What you're looking for is an apple that yields, like you can poke it with a fork or a knife, but you're not looking for applesauce here, so make sure they're not mush. And this one is looking fantastic to me. Gets my seal of approval. You need to wait a good 20 or 30 minutes before you try to cut and serve this. For one, you don't want to burn your mouth, and for two, you need to make sure that sauce has a little time to set up and thicken, otherwise it'll be too runny. It needs to cool down before it thickens. And if you found this video helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe below. We really appreciate it. And it's just that easy to make this absolutely delectable apple cobbler. It is sure to please family and friends alike. So thank you so much for watching, and come back again soon to see another minimalist gourmet video where I show you how to cook with very little.